Hello, welcome to Signal Noise, podcast brought to you by Market Once and ROI Rocket. My name is Brian Lamar. I'm your co-host. As always, joining me, well, almost always, Andrew DeSillis. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great today. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing well. We just got back from one of our little road trips. We'll talk about that more in a future podcast. But today, I'm really proud and excited to have Tom Anderson, Spencer Imel on their partners at Langston, and they're going to talk about AI stuff, which I feel like that's half of our conversations. But they're a cool company that's doing some cool stuff, and we're going to talk through that. So maybe we'll just start off. Have you all introduce yourselves? So Tom, Spencer, tell us more about your company and your background.
So I'm Spencer Imel. Been doing this with Tom for a number of years now, going on I think 8 years at Langston. And Langston is primarily a quant-focused consumer insights shop. So we do a lot of work with consumer surveys, brand health tracking, of course, segmentation studies, all those kind of big foundational things. But lately, we've been finding that the way that categories are evolving, the speed and pace of category evolution, means that we do a lot of category and audience exploration work and A&U studies, things like that. And of course, they all are colored by this new environment of ours, AI driven, a lot of digital involvement from consumers, and the way that consumers are interacting with brands is just evolving so rapidly every day. So we've been really fortunate in the last really several months, but even, for a year or two, to be spending a ton of our time working on categories, everything from stock trading platforms to travel booking to sneakers and apparel and outdoor technical gear, learning about what it is that consumers really want and expect from brands and how they're navigating and engaging with the brand landscape and the consumer landscape today. And part of that has brought us even into qualitative research and kind of all the different facets and elements of consumer insights, which has been really fun and exciting. But organizationally, our heart still lays in the consumer survey and of course, navigating how we use that data, that quantitative data in the modern world, which feels like it's changing every, I don't know, 2 or 3 days, something like that. The whole thing is turned over.
So, Spencer, you said you've been doing this with Tom for about 8 years. Is it fair to assume that you're co-founders? Is that correct?
We're co-founders, that's right. We met at a fast-growing startup in Denver that served mostly women between the ages of 40 and 80. The company was called Craftsy, and we produced educational content for crafters, for makers, and also sold products like yarn and thread and quilt backing. And as you can imagine, Spencer and I do not fit that demographic, and neither did 98% of our teammates at Craftsy. So Consumer Insights was kind of our window into the minds and hearts of crafters and was the reason why we were able to build products and content that were relevant for our audience. Spencer's background is in economics, mine's in demography. So we say like two social scientists walked into a bar and walked into a Denver startup, and Langston was born. And yeah, it's been a really fun ride ever since Spencer and I left what would become an acquisition from by NBC Universal. We worked for NBC for a little bit, and then we eventually decided to kind of chart our own path with Langston.
Fantastic. What was that like, kind of making the jump together into entrepreneurship? Particularly in like an agency space. You're in a startup, so going to your professional services agency model instead of another startup is a bit of a shift. How do you make the decision?
Yeah, and that's the sort of the straight line story. Of course, the real story is a little bit more textured and nuanced. We both had stopovers in between leaving Craftsy and then being able to do this work full time. And this company wasn't always called Langston. It had a different silly name at the beginning, Blue Hat Data, when it was just kind of an early idea, almost an experiment. It turns out Blue Hat Data, or Blue Hat, is also a cybersecurity framework, totally unrelated, but it quickly made Blue Hat Data a terrible name for a company. So we rebranded, we found a name that had some meaning to us and went with Langston. And but yeah, the early days were exciting, experimental, some moonlighting, some early just kind of talking with clients and folks that we really, really trusted in the space. And being in Denver, we are really fortunate to have a strong food and bev community. A bunch of businesses were based in Denver. We had Chipotle, we had Quiznos, Smashburger, Noodles and Company is based in Broomfield. pretty close to where I grew up. And so we kind of started in that space, talking to as many smart people as we could, learning about insights. Hey, how do you get information about consumers? How do you learn about the people that are buying from you or that might stop and get lunch, and what's going well and what's going poorly? And we have some ideas. What do you think of them? And we were extremely fortunate to get such high quality engagement with that community from the very beginning. Just, two guys and two laptops basically, but getting so much willingness to engage with folks from kind of throughout that industry, helping us really find where the opportunity was to be a great partner. And that's kind of what we found early on, was that, especially, in those days before COVID, that it was about partnership and showing up and wanting to do a good job. Today, I don't know if that is still the case. I think you need to be more skilled and talented and able to move quickly, be able to really scale. But at the time, just being willing to do whatever it takes to do a great job and be sort of statistically minded, that was enough for us to be able to start to really impact clients. And that's how we got our start.
Love that you approach that from the sense of how are you even learning about these things, right? It sounds like, marketing research is a science. Sometimes we can get a little stuffy and get a little bit stuck in our ways. So that's great that you kind of took a step back. I want to jump back to one thing that you said, though. You said the name Langston has meaning to both of you. Neither of your last names are Langston. How
That's right.
the company?
Yeah, so we share a common sort of coincidence between Tom and I is a love for travel. We have always talked about places we've been, places we go to. Tom, I hope you don't mind me saying, Tom speaks German and has since gotten me like deeply into learning about German culture and German language, which is something I will never forget him for. Learning that language has been, it's taken over many hours of my life. But when we started thinking about what we want to name the company, we looked for a name that represented something that had a lot of meaning to us and felt old and well established. We wanted to make sure that the company we were building had really strong roots and was reliable. This whole thing is built on reliability, trust, credibility. So we wanted a name that was less like a startup name. We didn't want to be Insights Lee or, Answer Quest or something like that. We wanted a name that really sounded like people that take this really seriously and is well traveled. And so we found the name by pulling out maps, and we started looking at maps and found places that kind of had meaning to us and reflected that sense of adventure, but also this kind of quest for knowing and discovery. And Langston is a common British name, and there are actual places on the map that we found. We started looking at towns and cities throughout England, and we found a township or something named Langston, and just thought, that's it. I don't know why, and I wish that there were a personal family name or something, but it was just something that spoke to the two of us and reflected this period of our lives together. So we went with it.
Have you been to the Langston that is the namesake of the company?
I wish I could say yes, but I honestly don't know where it is. We'll have to Google it and find it, and that'll be something we do maybe this summer.
I love it. And that could be a great little social media post or blog or something for y'all to do.
Yes, we'll take a picture.
And I promise we're going to get to AI, and I'll let Brian ask a question, but I love your story. You say that, one of the things y'all have in common is your love for travel. Where are your favorite places that you've been? If you had to pick, I'm making you pick.
I would say there's a place called Colca Canyon in Peru that is just spectacular. It's outside of a town called Arequipa, and it's in southern Peru, and it's just gorgeous. And you spend days hiking through the canyon, and there are families that have lived there for like centuries that still live there, and you can meet locals, and it's just a wonderfully different experience. Europe I love, but it's just a better bread there and better beer, and they right, of course Europe has an amazing richness, but it's much more familiar to life in the States compared to a place like Colca Canyon in Peru.
I think so. For me, there's a little town in New Zealand called Pauanui, and my wife's parents have spent a lot of time in Pauanui. They have a lot of friends there, and I've been fortunate to visit a couple of times. So I think I would say Pauanui, and that's my favorite place because obviously it has personal meaning. I've made some incredible memories there and connection, but also it's such a unique place. It's a sort of a peninsula that was discovered by these two brothers in, I want to say, the 60s or 70s. I mean, not discovered, it was known, but they sort of went to this place and thought this would be a great place to build a town. And it was basically not swampland, but really inaccessible, hard to get to, full of these horse flies that just like made nobody want to spend time there. But they had a vision. They built this town, they cut waterways into it, and so all the houses are along the waterways. You kind of like it's like fingers where all the driveways and streets are this way, and then all the water goes in this way. And so you can pull into a garage and you go out the back and you get in a boat, and it's just this really spectacular little kind of unassuming but wonderful vacation town in
Well,
New Zealand.
I've got any more questions. We could have just done a whole episode on how you chose the name Langston, because you mentioned you did you really pull out maps? Because a little known fact about me, I'm not even sure if Andrew knows this, is I'm obsessed with maps. And my favorite subreddit is map porn. I highly recommend it. They do really cool analytic things with maps, really creative stuff on Reddit with some maps.
Whoa.
Don't really pull out maps.
Yeah, we are. I mean, I don't know if we like literally pulled out maps, but we certainly
Digital maps.
digital maps.
Yeah.
But if Brian and Andrew, I'm curious. I'm sure your listeners have gotten to know you over the years, and have you if you haven't talked about your favorite place, I bet they're wondering right now. I bet they're curious where your favorite places to visit are.
Oh, here we go.
Sorry to throw that back on you, but I don't know. I feel like we all deserve an answer.
I'm gonna go a little generic probably. I haven't traveled much recently, but I was on a Central European and a little bit Eastern European trip, and it's a big city. I'm a big city fan. I loved Budapest,
Yeah.
and I'd gone to all the other cities near Budapest and went to Slovakia and a lot of that area. That whole region is just beautiful people, beautiful culture. But Budapest just blew me out of the water. It was just such an amazing city. I loved it. The people there are beautiful. The food is amazing. It was inexpensive, and I can't wait to go back.
It is stunning. Yeah. Super cool.
Okay, I've got to do 2 honorable mentions.
Oh God.
My the most beautiful place I've ever been is like Banff in Lake Louise. I mean just unreal, picturesque. You are literally walking in a screensaver. There's that like dot from Fairmont that's literally a screensaver. I also have this weird love for an island in the Venetian lagoon called Burano that a lot of it's not totally unknown, but all the houses are different colors, and they make silk there, and I absolutely adore it. I'm going in June on my honeymoon, and I'm so excited about it.
Oh, that's awesome.
But my favorite place in the whole world is a remote lake in Canada called like Ashigaba, and it's my best friend in the whole world has got a cabin out there, but it's kind of like you drive for 12 hours, then you off road for 90 minutes, then it's another hour-long boat ride. You're hours away from electricity and running water, but it's not like these huge mountains like the Canadian Rockies or anything, but it's just such a like serene, peaceful place. I try to get up there once every couple of years, but that's my favorite place.
Wow.
Yeah,
That sounds amazing.
Amazing. Idyllic.
yeah. But Tom, I know you mentioned hiking through the canyon, so it sounds like some remote travel is on your menu as well.
Yeah, I've been there, done that situation before the kids came. I was gotta have the modern conveniences available for.
This is such a better conversation than if you had named your company Answer Probe or whatever you said.
Yeah, right.
There you go. Yeah.
This would have never happened. Man, I would love to talk about travel all day long, but I guess we should probably talk about some cool stuff that you all are doing. I'd love to get into it. I just recently presented about AI. I know everybody's talking about AI, and it looks like, and this is probably a little bit dated data, 6 months old, which is in the AI in the current world is a little old, but a third of researchers aren't using AI at all. A third are kind of dabbling, and a third are really into it.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that has changed a little bit over the last 6 months, but I'm curious what your all's philosophy is, and maybe a little bit of what your approach is to AI.
Yeah, totally. So I think, saying we've kind of gotten in the habit of lately is that AI has made speed cheap, but trust is still expensive. And that really reflects kind of our arc as an organization, where 12 months ago, we were deeply skeptical of AI, not in the sense that we didn't think it would disrupt our industry or that we didn't think it was a critical tool of the future, we knew all of those things. It was extremely apparent, by early 2025 that, hey, AI is coming and it's not going anywhere. But we didn't know how to participate in the, call it AI revolution or AI disruption, in a way that we could feel good about, knowing that our firm's DNA is all about dependability, reliability. We are your partner. We're with you on the journey. We've said for a long time that research excellence and bulletproof data, those are things that make Langston stand apart. So we had a little bit of an identity crisis around this idea of trust and reliability when we started hearing, especially from our own clients, that, hey, y'all are moving too slow. You are, you take 6 to 10 weeks to return data and even longer to return insights if I come back to you. And you have people going through data tables. You're making cuts of data with Excel. We got really, of course, curious early on, and we found that we were getting terrible results. That engines, this was still in the time people were talking a lot about hallucinations and LLMs were making things up, and you would hear the phrase AI is bad at math. And we started to really believe that, LLMs are risky and untrustworthy. And that, I mean, I do think to a certain extent that was the state of the world at that time. But more than anything, we just had a lot to learn in the interim about how to set up AI for success. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about some of those lessons and kind of what we figured out over the last few months, at least what works for us. But kind of where we've landed is that idea that, yeah, AI has made speed cheap. It's really sped everything up, but
Mhm.
implementing it the right way, implementing your system, setting up context, making sure that that any LLM is set up with the right tools that it needs to return accurate information. That's really the core, and that's where trust comes from, is setting it up to succeed instead of fail.
First off, I'm really excited to have this conversation because, not to speak for Andrew, but I feel like our brand is similar to your brand at an individual level, even where we work, is that trust is so key. And I love that quote that speed is cheap and trust is expensive. And I'm not sure if I had an identity crisis. I think I was dipping my toes in the water. Maybe I was going too slow. No one ever told me I was going too slow, but I probably was going too slow. So yeah, love to hear more of how you've kind of evolved and where you're at today. This is fascinating.
Yeah, and I'll just say that internally we've been using AI for a number of years, but for the same types of tasks that any white collar worker uses AI, right? Like, hey, here's a tricky situation. What advice do you have? Or hey, I'm working on this questionnaire. Can you help be a thought partner on different inputs? Or I'm looking for 14 competitors to this brand, and we're doing a brand health study. Am I on the right track, right? But it was really that next step. How are we incorporating AI to make things faster, cheaper, and better for our clients? That's what our clients wanted. And they started articulating that at the beginning of 2025. And their reason to believe why they could get things faster, cheaper, or better, I would say there were several kind of like reasons for that are worth putting on the table right now. One is there's been a proliferation of AI tools that have hit the market over the last couple of years. A lot of that is because venture capitalists have said, "Hey, this is a space that's disruptive and or ripe for disruption, and we're going to put a ton of money, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars behind Harvard Business School graduates and Stanford Business School graduates to create startups that are going to disrupt the space." And so that message was being reverberated out to our clients, right? These consumer insights heroes, we call them, consumer insights professionals, from analysts all the way up to SVP of insights at Fortune 1000 companies. They were hearing again and again and again, things can be done more effectively, much faster, and for much less money. And by more effective, I mean same level of quality, if not better, right? That's kind of generally been the message. And it's through these kind of like AI powered services and or AI powered products. And so when our clients started really beating that drum at the beginning of last year, we said, okay, this is a wake up call that like we need to engage in some soul searching. How do we stay true to who we've always been and really maintain partnership and humanness and super high quality while also kind of folding in AI into our offering. So what actually like kicked that off? I think that was your question. Like how did we hit these strides? How did we hit? I would say that it hasn't been a smooth curve up or a linear curve up. It's been defined by certain inflection points. The very first one was when Neil, our VP of engineering, went really, really, really deep, like nights and weekends, on what AI, what the mechanics are that underlie AI. And some of this is a bit like outside of my knowledge area, and Spencer, I might bump to you, but what Neil basically, the TLDR in all of Neil's discovery is that we think of ChatGPT and Gemini like these magical solutions that can kind of do everything. But in fact, there's so much under the hood that is working in ways that you wouldn't expect. One example is that if you ask ChatGPT to do math for you, it actually doesn't have the ability to do that math itself. What it does is it writes Python script that it thinks is appropriate to solve that math problem, and then it sends that to another tool to be processed that then sends the answer back to ChatGPT. But if that Python script featured any kind of inconsistency or logical error, which is super common actually in with these models still, then the math is going to be all wrong. And there were a lot of little moments like that around how do all of these mechanics actually work? And when Neil really got his arms around it, he started to teach the rest of our team, and in particular our two other engineers. And that was a huge turning point in saying, okay, now that we fundamentally kind of understand how these tools work, we're ready to start thinking about different products that we could build for our team around them.
Yeah, I think I would say that, there was a moment of realization, not a moment of we always knew this, but it's like we're able to achieve a certain level of clarity where we said, you know what, AI tools really are not magic. And that's a good thing. Once you start to understand, hey, AI tools operate in really core, predictable, and actually super smart ways, you can then start to say, okay, well, if I can predict how a tool is going to operate, then can I now step in at core stages and core moments in that operating cycle or that operating procedure and say, hey, let me relieve you of that duty. You don't need to do that. I will help you out. So in Tom's example of, a model that says, hey, I'm supposed to perform math or I'm supposed to analyze a data file or something, saying, I'm going to unpack that. I have access to the entire internet. So I'm going to search all of the world's knowledge, and I can quickly learn and access information about how to write a Python script or how to run a routine in R or somewhere else, and how to then publish that and put it on a server and execute that code, and then create data inputs and then read the outputs and return it in a natural language format. That's extraordinary that all of that can happen in 2 seconds. On the other hand, when you load a data file and ask a model to do something like that, you're asking it to interpret a lot. You're asking it to make some inferences that it should understand what these columns mean and what this data means, and whether a denominator should be every row of data in that spreadsheet or just the rows of data that aren't null, et cetera, et cetera. So we sort of treat these models as magic, and as a result, we really set them up to fail by sort of abdicating our job of providing context, providing structure, providing rules. Once we started to understand that and look at these core moments where, hey, if you are a really smart person who just didn't happen to work in insights and you got pulled in on your first day of the job, somebody said, hey, cut this data by gender over the last 9 waves of brain health tracking, you would be making a lot of guesses and you might get pretty darn close. And that's why these models look like magic, but you wouldn't be reliably correct without the training. And so doing that, we now said, okay, well, certain things we don't need AI to do. We don't need it to do the math. We can do the math. We have internal software that actually does math. We built a whole desktop application that does this exact thing. What we need is to make it easier for people to interact with those tools. And so by trying to build research systems that use AI when it's absolutely strongest and ask AI not to invent the wheel when at all possible, we've kind of created this scenario. And we're still improving it all the time. It's not perfect by any means, but it's gotten us a lot closer to the belief that we can produce something that's pretty darn bulletproof time after time.
Can you give us an example of something that AI is really good at and how you've implemented it in your research process?
Absolutely. I would say I mean, AI more than any AI is ultimately a language tool, right? The model under any AI tool is an LLM, a large language model. And what it is so good at is understanding and interpreting ideas. That's one thing. Remembering a ton of stuff at the same time if you manage context properly. That's the second thing. And then synthesizing all of those together. That's the third thing it's great at. The thing it's fine at, but it's binary. Either it can do this or it can't, is tool calls. So if you create a reliable tool and your AI agent is given context on how to interact with that tool, is given access to that tool, then it will do fine. Yes or no, it's a yes. It can do that every time. So by being really good at understanding language and framing up questions, remembering context on your organization, your goals, what you're trying to achieve, and then how you perform that analysis, how someone ought to perform this analysis, AI can kind of do the work of a human analyst really, really quickly because it takes no time to spool up. It's not hobbled by context switching. It doesn't get tired at the end of the day, and it doesn't run out of steam. And so it can perform a really complicated analysis routine and then synthesize that information and return it to you within the context of a lot of sort of underlying data and information you've given to it. It can do that all very quickly without getting tired.
So this is our Insights Assistant, and right now our Insights Assistant is only connected to data in the facial skincare category. Okay.
Since this is the podcast, I'll just describe. We're just looking at a blank window. This is basically a chatbot. If you've ever used ChatGPT, it looks a lot like that. It's a different color, and it just says Insights Assistant, facial skincare subcategory, trained to think, analyze, and explore data like a Langstonite, which is our self-proclaimed term for someone who works here.
We're going to talk a little bit more about our category specific research and the type of data sets that we collect across categories, but just want to try to like bring this to life for you. I'll say right now that this is a product that we launched internally 3 weeks ago. We've been optimized. It looks very different. It operates very different every week. The iteration cycles, the innovation cycles are so extremely fast because AI is now writing 90% of our code, of our engineering code, which is insane, right? A year ago, less than 1% of our code was written by AI. Now it's about 90%. So we're working right now on how do you basically make this a little more user-friendly for Insights stakeholders to use instead of just giving them kind of this like blank prompt. But I'm curious if you have any questions within the facial skincare space around consumers, brands, how people make decisions, etc.
Maybe like, what are the best skincare items for sensitive skin available at Amazon? Is that a question that it could look
So
at?
that would be a good question from like a consumer perspective,
Yep.
right? What are the best? But for let's imagine that we're Olay, right? We're a brand manager
Oh,
at
okay.
Olay. So I'll just say like I'm a brand manager at Olay, and I'd like to know how my brand is performing among younger versus older consumers. Does that work?
Yes, yeah. That's
Okay.
great.
So what it's doing now is it's going into the first thing it does is it goes and looks for the inputs that might be relevant. So it's going to find the brands that we have. So it's going to find Olay and then competitors, and then it's going to look at younger versus older consumers. How might that be defined, etc. And so it says, great question. Before I dive deeper into age comparison, it might be helpful to share a quick overview of what's included in the study and what we mean by brand performance. Would I like a brief orientation? And I'll just say, nope, show me it right now. So it's going to show me Olay as well as 36 other competitors by these different age groups.
And while it's thinking about that, I'll say we are looking at data collected through a product we call Landscapes, which is kind of we don't call it a syndicated research product, but it's similar in that we collect data, really, really deep, detailed ANU style kind of category data in specific consumer categories. And so this facial skincare is one of those subcategories. We could also use this tool and we could deploy it against rain jackets or stock trading platforms or travel booking sites, all of these other categories. At the end of the day, the data that you work with matters a lot. And we have completely glossed over that in this conversation. I don't think we need to circle back to it at all. But obviously, you guys know more than anyone how much the data and the source of your survey data drives results. And of course, there's a lot of dialogue about synthetic data and when there's a time and a place for kind of every tool. And that's all. I totally agree. This is just kind of all to say that we have skipped over the what's underneath this tool.
Yeah,
That's not nothing. That really does matter.
yeah, we'll
As,
get to this. Yeah, sorry, Brian, Andrew, I'll pause.
as someone that doesn't get to see much of the back end of research, I'm
Yeah.
primarily in the front end of the design phase, right? And I get involved only at the quality level of insights unless I'm doing my own research. So this is probably a novice question. If you're a brand manager, if you're a brand, is this the new dashboard? Is this the deliverable that clients now receive? Is something like this where you just chatbot it questions and it gives you insights and deliverables? Like that was, I'll let you explain what just happened on our screen, but
Yeah.
that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, this is definitely one way to interact with data. I think there are going to be three ways of getting three kind of deliverable formats, and a company like Langston will offer all three. So the first will be continued kind of human partnership and a report, a strategic report that summarizes all the key points and rolls them up into a so what, a now what, so what kind of framework. The second is going to be some kind of dashboard or kind of place where you can visually see all of your data in one spot. So that might be a dashboard, it might be an Excel file with a bunch of cross tabs. And then the third will be this, which I think is the most innovative, which is essentially an LLM that sits on top of your data and is trained on your data that you can talk to query. You can ask it in a very iterative, hypothesis driven way to pull information for you and to kind of like build a story with you. And this is the kind of use case for this primarily is going to be for those that get asked questions, which happens all the time from stakeholders around the org to say, hey, how are we doing against Neutrogena? How are we doing against CeraVe? Well, how are men versus women making purchase decisions, et cetera? You could just go into a platform like this and start asking those types of questions.
Yeah, I think, when you get a question or you pass along a question to a researcher, there are a number of things you could want back. Sometimes you want an answer, sometimes you want a picture, sometimes you want a story. And we're trying to optimize tools to allow users to get what it is they want back out of it at any given moment. And it's true. Sometimes you get asked a question. It used to be by email or in a meeting. Now it's probably a Slack chat or a Teams chat. One line question, that user expects a one line answer. So how are we performing with younger consumers? They want to hear, we are doing great at the top of the funnel, but deteriorating in consideration. We need to find a way to get them to buy. Or not that well. We're doing much better with older consumers, probably because we're a legacy brand. That's really bite-sized and quick, but it needs to be reliable and hold up under scrutiny when the going gets tough. Oftentimes a picture helps illustrate the point. So if you can get your audience to look at a chart or a graph, awesome. But sometimes the question really betrays how detailed the topic really is and needs to be. So a question like, how are we doing with younger consumers, can lull to sleep the fact that, well, this is a really nuanced, robust, and important story. And you need to give me more than one line to be able to tell you what you need to know, right? Well, it's complicated. There's a lot of texture here. We need to unpack it together. But Brian, that's an amazing question. Is the chatbot the new dashboard? I don't know. And we're trying to figure this out as fast as we can. I don't think anybody knows, by the way, but we're trying to figure it out through using the tools and getting as many people using these tools as we can as they become available. So we're just in the early stages of the process, but this is one of the things I'm most excited about, to figure out how people are going to consume information in an AI forward world. I don't know if we have the attention span for a 10 slide deck anymore or for a dashboard
Right.
full of all these cards. Like maybe, and we're going to make sure that that's available for people that are used to working that way. But I have a feeling that we're about to really, really revolutionize the way the insights get shared out. And we really are just seeing the very first ripples of that.
So this product, first of all, this is really powerful. For those of you who are not on YouTube and can't see Tom's screen, it was able to share by a number of attributes: familiarity, consideration, if they've ever purchased, repeat purchase, so on and so forth, by age cuts, by brand. And it did all that in just a couple seconds. So this is some pretty powerful retrieval augmented generation. My question is, when you're building a tool like this so that it's not just a way to interact with the data, you're building like category level syndicated tools. Two questions. One, how much survey data has to sit behind this
Hmm.
to be useful? Because I would imagine you have to run a segmentation and a path to purchase and a brand tracker and so that this is useful to a brand manager. Are there other types of data that you're also kind of putting in that library
Yeah.
for the tool to access? Like, I mean, because it's just it doesn't go out to the internet. Is it like give me a sense for what's sitting underneath this so that it's useful? Because my hypothesis is a lot, and I just would love to understand that.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. And you're right. At the end of the day, it's really easy to think of the data that drives an AI tool as just the survey data or just the rows. But again, that would be the equivalent of taking a really, really smart person out of college and signing them up at a consumer insights firm and saying, hey, here's the spreadsheet. Go tell me the story. The amount of data that we just interpret as context or human lived experience is unbelievable, but we have to be really thoughtful about providing all of that to the model and to the tool because it's not going to go and fetch it. It doesn't have a lived experience, a human experience as a consumer. So for us, the kind of types of data are, you mentioned really extensive survey data, and that is the landscapes ecosystem for us. It's unbelievable how many thousands of rows and tens of thousands of columns of data sit underneath this ecosystem. And you're right, it's everything from purchase journey to ANU to brand specific brand landscape data. There is a segmentation built in, and then there are custom category specific segmentations underneath that. Yeah, all of that. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real power is two types of context. One is context on the industry and the brands in it. What is going on? And this information is available in public, financial reports, right? Quarterly financial results and reports that companies share and news articles and all of the context that we can scrape and pull about the industry, which today is largely done by humans who are experts in that industry. Well, on our team, we have somebody who sits on the outdoor vertical and somebody who sits on the health and wellness vertical. And so they're doing everything they can to cull the universe of information and feed the model with context. The second piece of context is research techniques. And this is something that I think a lot of tools in the industry so far have gotten either half right or have overlooked altogether. And that's a challenge that you have when you have external companies, sort of companies that are tech first and research second, come into a space, is they overlook the research part without even knowing it. Because we've been doing this for 8 years, we have really well documented analysis routines and methodological approaches. So we know, okay, when we see this dynamic in the funnel, that's an I've heard of it problem. But when we see this dynamic in the funnel, that's a dry powder problem. And there's actually meaning to those words. And this is what it means. And there are three ways a brand might address it. And they are these things. And so we've created, we call it an articles library or a content library, where we're trying to document everything that we would teach a consumer insights analyst from their first day on the job until their senior director overseeing client relationships, and build all of that in with examples, with data, with underlying dynamics, and then importantly, with red herrings. Sometimes you'll see this, that is not this dynamic, or people often make this mistake, don't be confused. So providing all of that context in a way that the LLM can access on the fly, it means that when you do what Tom just did, which is put a single question or simple question into a chat, you get what Tom just got, which, as you mentioned, a detailed table with all of these data segment cuts, but really importantly, interpretation. I see this, it might mean that. We should dig deeper here. And I could sort of read out some of the results of that, but ultimately
Yeah.
what we're looking
Let's
for
do that.
there is a short story, and that's what we're getting back from the tool.
So I know, first of all, that's very impressive, and I imagine it was quite a Herculean task to document all of those things to give the context that it needed.
Been a lot. Yeah.
What one thing that I know is a limitation of AI is that when you pull down a model, you're trying to train it, you're trying to um, customize it to a particular task, is that so you have this huge library. And
Mhm.
sometimes, and I'm thinking you probably have a solve for this, like this is where my systems have failed when I've tried to do things,
Okay.
is that the model has to re-reference all of that
Yeah.
every single time, right?
Yeah.
And that's a place where it can really break down. So what level of networking is involved here, where you have different tasks, you have different brains, if you will, different spaces that are really
Yeah.
different things, right? Because that's something like a problem that I've been trying to solve is the LLM, like you said, it's language, it's interpreting. Well,
Hmm.
there are some things we don't want it to interpret, and a little bit of Python code between the different tasks that it's doing
Yeah.
can go a long way. So I mean, if
Yeah.
you could just dive into like how you even created the networking of different contexts and different specialized models to do something like this. I mean, it has to be really complex.
It is. It's something that we're continuing to build out. As Spencer mentioned, it has taken a lot of time to basically have our team sit down and say, what are all of the patterns that we see in our day to day? What are all of the kind of thought processes to go from raw data to a story? And what we've realized is that much like a radiologist can look at an X-ray and be like, "Yep, that's it." And you're like, "Wait, what? Is that even like a thing?" Is that he's like, oh yeah, it's a big scar. It's like that looks like everything else on this X-ray. That's how we have trained our team over the last 5 years, but a very much kind of learn by doing way. And what we've had to do, what we've kind of forced ourselves to do, is to say, what are all of those patterns, all of those approaches, all of those thought processes? How can we put them down in a way that makes sense, that's interconnected, that a model could read and just get? And we'll put pen to paper, we'll test kind of how our instructions, how our context works, and if it goes awry or if it doesn't work as expected, we go back and we edit it and optimize it. It's a very circular process of doing testing, learning, revising, doing testing, learning, revising, and we're in the process of doing that right now, as we make it stronger and smarter.
Yeah, and I'd say that's the case from the research side, and then from the technical side, Andrew, I could start to answer your question, and there is no way I can finish. So this is where Neil, our VP of Engineering, Neil Poulin, is so talented in this space and has just leveled this company up so far in the last 6 months, 9 months. And the team working with him is just extraordinary. But they've taught me enough to be dangerous. So I can say that, the issue you're talking about is context window management
Yeah.
and this idea of compaction, which is so fascinating and honestly has brought me so much relief to understand even just a little bit, because I feel like I get I get some of the things that are happening in the world today where people say, "Hey, I told the model this thing, but then it completely forgot about it or it made something up out of the blue. Why did that happen?" So starting to understand how context windows work with models. And like the short version, what worked on me, that as I think what you were describing as well, but in case it's helpful for listeners, is that we talk about LLMs having these memories, but there's no actual memory. There's not a brain anywhere. These models are models, probabilistic models that draw on external resources, but ultimately are processing language. So the memory, the quote unquote memory from a chat tends to be embedded in the chat itself. So when you're chatting with ChatGPT or Claude or another tool, if you ask it a question, it gives you an answer, and then you ask a follow-up, your third prompt or your second prompt, that third exchange, it's actually the thing you typed plus everything that has come before. So it's your last question, but also its answer and your first question. And then it answers that, passes everything back to you as the user, and then you might ask a follow-up, and it passes everything back to the model again from that very first chat. And so what happens is you end up passing a ton of information. If your chat lasts very long at all, you're now sending huge amounts of information back and forth, and that starts eventually to become a problem where the model actually can't handle and process that much information, at least not very quickly and very cheaply. So it says, okay, well, I'm going to do something that LLMs are really good at. On this next prompt, when you send your question, it says, well, I'm just going to return a summary of our chat so far. And so while it's keeping the quote unquote memory of that conversation, it might be cutting out some core pieces and compacting them. And the longer your chat goes, the more information you exchange back and forth, the more of your previous conversation gets summarized. So you end up kind of like losing, almost dropping important bits of the information in the conversation. For us, dealing with that context window management is all about orders of operation. So if we can create a structure to say, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. How are we doing with younger consumers instead of older consumers? Okay, step one, identify what relevant fields are in the study. Get that done. keep that information, forget about the rest. Now I know the question and the relevant fields. Okay, step 2, I need to go pull some analysis. So find out what analysis is available to me and return it. Okay, great. Now I've got the analysis in the original context. I can forget about the rest. Step 3, now I need to look at this data and understand the analysis routine. So now I'm going to go to that library that Tom was talking about and start to filter through what are the techniques and methodologies and patterns that I should recognize. So we try to kind of break the process down into core chunks, having an associated tool at each of those chunks. And that way the model is set up to succeed the whole way.
That's fantastic. I have a comment and a question, and if you don't want to go this direction, that's fine. But
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of thinking. First of all, my comment is I love this Neil guy. And I think all researchers should do what Neil did, and something I haven't done is to really understand how these LLMs are built and
Yeah.
how to best leverage them and understand them. And that's really when you maximize the power of these things. And I think that's one of the more brilliant things that you've said today is that you all really understand how to best leverage these tools. And that's apparent in everything you're talking about. My question is, and this is, we can ignore this question if you like, is what you showed us and what you're building and what is happening to our industry.
Yeah.
And the context around this is Andrew and I've been talking and we've been thinking about future and how do we leverage this. I'm talking to a futurist and I'm like,
Yeah.
where are we going? Are we as a company best positioned? Are we as individuals best positioned? Because we've all seen the kind of the dramatic predictions, right? So I have a couple of questions. Number one, can anyone at a brand almost become an instant expert? Like you could the CEO could pull that up and have some sort of high level understanding or a misunderstanding of the data. And you mentioned interpretation of the data. We know that all the time that you have to be somewhat trained as a researcher to do that. This offers the ability to almost anyone to think that they're an expert and make business decisions off of data. That's my question number one. Number two, and this is probably a whole nother podcast. How does this affect our role as market researchers and insights consultants? And so these dates might be wrong. When I think of the industry, I think of the early days of research until probably the 70s. Brands led the research, and the market research companies were really field and tab experts, right? And methodology experts, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what suppliers did. At some point, I'm guessing it's in the 70s, brands realized there was a bias there, and they started outsourcing not just the methodology and the design, they started outsourcing the insights as well. And then researchers became super valuable. We became category experts, not just research experts. And we became experts on brands and got us all kinds of cool jobs. And I think that is still occurring today. Given this, what you just kind of showed us, does it go back? How does that affect companies like Langston and affect companies like us when you're building these amazing tools that arm brands with the ability to uncover such amazing insights instantaneously? Do we then become app builders and technology and AI experts? And the brands go back to becoming, we're back to brand experts because we have it all of our fingertips. And if my CEO asks me a question, I know it instantaneously in the meeting, and we can arm ourselves with the data that we need. I just need you to build me the platform. I need you to design the right research so I can make confident business decisions. Are those fair questions? Number one, is that another podcast? Those are some of the things that I thought of. I'd love to what your all thoughts on what I just said.
There are different, if you're running a project from the beginning to end, you have to wear a lot of different hats, right? You have to be an architect, you have to be a methodologist, you have to be an analyst, a data analyst, you have to be a storyteller, you have to be a presenter. And so I think what would be interesting for another podcast would be to map out all of those different roles, all those different hats that one has to wear, and then say, how is AI affecting each step here? Because I don't think AI will fundamentally replace any one of those roles, but it's going to cause each one of those roles to evolve. In the grand scheme of things, I think there will be even more importance on sharing the insights. So what is maybe I work with Insights Assistant, our AI tool, to come up with a really awesome story for Olay, which, by the way, is not a client. It's not a client right now as of this recording. Maybe we come up with a really awesome story for Olay. And maybe Insights Assistant could do that in 6 months or a year. Maybe it could come up with the entire story and chart it out and put headlines and call outs. But at the end of the day, that's just going to be a document. And someone needs to go in with a pretty high level of energy and an excitement and an ability to get that information shared and to get that information adopted and socialized and turned into actual decisions. And I think that increasingly our roles as insights and strategists will be to take what we get with the help of AI, having reduced a lot of clicks in our workflow and
Yeah.
making that real.
Yeah, and I think, Tom, it brings up another good point, is that no matter what we build and how good it gets, asking the tool the right questions is still
Mhm.
that will always be an art and a value add
Mm-hmm.
along the way.
That's absolutely right. And
Yeah.
ultimately, our job is to understand people. And at the end of the day, whether it's asking questions in the analysis phase or asking consumers questions to generate the underlying data, that is still a very human experience. Now, tools are going to speed this up. They're going to make it faster. We will get better and better at inferring what a human's response might be to a question. And in some cases, we might be so good at it that the outcome is indistinguishable from if we had asked the real question. That may be the case. As I said, there's a time and a place for everything. But at the end of the day, there will always be a need to have the level of richness, robustness, and reliability in data that you can actually make real assessments. You can draw real conclusions about how people think, how they shop, how they act, what they think about brands, etc.
Mm.
Is Tom more likely to like this shoe in red or blue? A computer might get very good at predicting that if it knows enough about Tom or people like Tom. But to say, is Tom more focused on connections with family, friends, and other social and community right now, or more focused on achievement and and safety and financial success? Like, you really need to talk to Tom to understand that. Now, you may be able to get so much data on people like him that you could predict that for a period, and then those types of people are going to change. And so, over the long run, I think the field of research, like any other field, is going to evolve as a result of technology, and AI is just accelerating the speed of that evolution within our field. But we are becoming systems designers and architects, and that system might be a research system, but it might be a delivery system, a storytelling system, and it might be how we interact with the organization, how and when we inject consumers into that conversation, and how we provide the safeguards and the guardrails so that a CEO who uses the tool wrong doesn't get something backwards or forget to provide important context and end up making a really dangerous decision with data that's not at their fingertips. That said, there are some organizations that are small and don't have big consumer insights teams. Should their executive team be using these tools instead of no data when they make their cut? Yeah, they probably should.
So you bring up a really good point, and I know we're going a little long, but if I can ask one more question. You just talked about the kind of the CEO using the tool incorrectly, right? And
Yeah.
there's also when selecting a partner or selecting a tool, right? I mean, it would take you a year to show a full time for you to show me everything that's inside your Insights Assistant and how
That's
it works.
right.
So that's impossible. So,
Yeah.
what are the risks that are associated with this type of tool with AI permeating our process?
Mm.
I think one core risk is shallow insights. It's way too easy to ask a question, get an answer, move on, and miss the really, really important nuance of the underlying conversation. The
That's my
why, the
concern, Tom.
because, the so what. Yeah. And I don't know what the resolution to that is. I don't think it's only let trained professionals use tools. Like that's just not a realistic perspective on the future, but figuring out how we navigate that, but like how do we keep the rich story, the nuance, the so what, and that one or two clicks deeper. I don't think that every question needs to become a dissertation by any means. Sometimes it really is a bullet point, but to know when to ask a little bit deeper. Hey, why are you asking me this? What decision are you making? What are the consequences of this decision? How big of a deal will it be if we get this right or wrong? And being able to use that to prioritize how much time you really should spend with the data. I think that's something that the industry hasn't figured out yet.
I wanted to, if there's time and if there's interest, bring one point up that's been the most interesting for me, actually the most impactful, which
Yeah.
is around velocity of hypothesis testing, and actually like engage in a 3-minute little exercise with you to show you that. But if that's off topic, or if the timer's up, then I don't want to draw out the clock.
Let's do it.
Is that cool with you, Brian?
Yeah, good.
Okay, so Insights Assistant has opened our eyes to what we're increasingly believing to be a truth about research in general at like a very high level, which is that the faster you can test hypotheses, the deeper you're going to go. And also, if there is a little bit of friction in testing hypotheses, including just a couple of extra clicks, your brain, in order to kind of conserve energy or take the path of least resistance, which our brains love to do, will just naturally not ask the type of questions that will be asked if you have access to a tool that allows you to ask those questions very quickly. So I'll show you an example of this. In that example, for those who aren't viewing, in the example that we instructed our Insights Assistant to pull up earlier, it was show me Olay's full funnel by age group with 18 to 34-year-olds as younger and 45 plus as older. And it showed us a table with, as you mentioned, Andrew, from aided awareness down to repeat purchase. And we see here that consideration is really where you see the biggest gaps between younger and older, where older consumers, 82% say that they would consider buying Olay versus just 59% of younger. And our Insights Assistant told us the core challenge appears to be relevance and consideration among 18 to 34-year-olds. The brand is well known and understood, but younger consumers aren't seeing it as a brand for them. So that naturally, immediately kicks off the question, if Olay is less relevant to younger consumers, what do younger consumers prioritize when they are buying within this category? All right. And what are their needs relative to older consumers? So this is where I'm able, because it's so easy to ask a question, my brain has so many questions that are top of mind. Whereas if I had to go into a data set with thousands of columns and tons of tables and click around and control F
Yeah.
and right,
Or even a
not gonna
dashboard.
do that.
Even if it's just like, oh, I have to go click this filter and cut it by age and then scroll back down. Like the mental fatigue of combing through data, even if it's pretty darn accessible,
Yeah,
it's just really high.
analysis paralysis. I live it every day.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
So I
Oh,
can
wow.
come in and ask it very pointedly. I'm going to let it kind of do its work right now for those who are listening and not viewing. It just pulled up some tables, and it's continuing to generate output. Where we're looking at purchase. I asked it, if Olay is less relevant to younger consumers, what do younger consumers prioritize when buying in this category, and what are their needs relative to older consumers? And you can see that there are some places where you see quite significant differences between younger and older. So younger consumers are way more likely to buy because they started a new skincare routine. That makes sense. They're way less likely to buy because they wanted more visible results, which is aligns with older consumers in this space. They're more likely to buy as a gift or as an impulse purchase. You can see when it comes to product feature important, suitable for sensitive skin is way more important for younger consumers and older consumers, whereas hydrating and moisturizing is way more important for older versus younger. So we're able to very quickly start to illuminate what the puzzle pieces are, even, and we can then take all of this information and kind of like snap it together in a story. Does that make sense?
And by the way, here's the story. So the nice thing is how these tools can kind of synthesize the data then, again, helping you think like a researcher, but ultimately leaving the decision about what you share and what you don't share in your own hands. So we got those kind of data tables up above, so somebody can pull a snapshot or make a chart or whatever. And by the way, we can ask Insights Assistant to make charts. We've just turned it off for now to speed up this exploration. And then it gives us not only these kind of 4 key points, they're in exploration mode with a bunch of detail. Sensitivity is greater than performance with a bunch of detail. Aesthetics and values matter more to younger buyers, and skin changes are a key entry point for younger buyers. But then it summarizes this up even further into what we call the so what now what this means for Olay. Olay's traditional positioning around anti-aging performance and clinically proven results aligns strongly with what older consumers prioritize, which explains why the brand's consideration and purchase funnel is so strong among 45 plus. But younger consumers are shopping for skincare with a different mindset. They want skin sensitivity solutions, clean ingredients, routine building support, and brands that look and feel relevant to them. If Olay wants to close the consideration gap with 18 to 34-year-olds, the brand may need to emphasize its fit for sensitive skin, its ingredient story, and its visual aesthetic appeal, not just its clinical results. That's a really fully formed, kind of well-baked story, which might be a mouthful for your org. And that's another piece where the insights professional still has a really important job to do, which is how do I tailor this for my audience, get it to the right person with the right level of granularity, and make sure that it's believable and I can stand behind it.
That's really, really cool. I wish we had more time. Really powerful. If people want to know more about Langston or you guys, how can they find you? How do they reach out to you?
You can find us on our website, www.thelangstonco.com. And of course, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, even all the places that you would expect to find us. The Langston Company or Langston Insights is a really good way to find us, and we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I want to touch base in a few months because the pace of this industry is crazy. No telling what we'll be talking about in 6 months later this year. It's exciting and a little scary at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to that conversation. And if you have questions, reach out to these guys, Tom and Spencer. Really cool stuff, and we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for
Andrew, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a blast, and we really appreciate the chance to chat with you and your listeners.
Yeah, I have a strong feeling that we'll be having both of you back on.
Awesome.
We'd love nothing more.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.